Everybody, my name is Liz David Barrett. I'm the Director of the Centre for the Study of Corruption and the Deputy Director of the GIACE programme, and I'm going to be the chair today, standing in for Paul Heywood, who's unable to make it. So welcome. This is the latest seminar in our ACE seminar series, in which researchers from across all of the component elements of the FCDO-funded anti-corruption evidence programme present on the topics that they're researching. We record these sessions, so just to let you know that we are recording and we will make this available afterwards. So today we're delighted to have Tihomira Kostova with us, talking on hidden trade routes, illicit networks and alternative markets in sanctions circumvention. Tihomira is a senior analyst at the renowned Centre for the Study of Democracy in Sofia in Bulgaria, and she specialises in anti-corruption policy, good governance and institutional integrity. Her work focuses on public accountability, risk assessment methodologies, and strengthening transparency in both national and EU level institutions. So Tihomira's talk today is based on her research being carried out under the auspices of one of the current GIACE projects, which is called Building Institutional Resilience to Global Illicit Financial Flows as Enablers and Drivers of State Capture. That project is led by Ruslan Stefanov and colleagues at the CSD. So Tihomira is going to talk for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then we're going to invite reflections from our discussant, Nedim Hogic, who joins us from the University of Oslo's Faculty of Law. He's a research fellow there. Nedim is particularly working on corruption, on the rule of law, EU law, international law, negotiation, peace building, and Western Balkans politics. And in this field in particular of anti-corruption, he's been looking at how the judiciary confronts corruption. But he's also worked a lot on security and corruption, examining the regulation of corruption as a national security threat. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Tihomira. Tihomira, would you like to share your screen?
We have estimated the illicit financial flows in 10 target countries. These are the 6 Western Balkan countries, the 3 Black Sea, Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova, plus Armenia. By applying the partner country method, which is one of the UNCTAD's methods for measuring illicit financial flows from trade. And the results indicated that after 2021, or since the invasion of Ukraine, the illicit financial flows have increased in all countries. Further, in 2023, the total illicit financial flows in all countries from both regions have surged to 31 USD billion, double their size compared to the annual pre-war average for 12 years, or between 2010 and 2021. On the second slide, we see that the countries Ukraine...
Tihomira, I'm sorry, the slides are not moving either for us.
Oh, I don't know why I'm moving them. Can I share this? Can I?
Oh, now it's moved.
Now it's moved back.
Now we're on slide 2, but we were previously only on 1. Okay, now we're on 3. Okay.
Okay.
Seems to be moving now.
Okay, I don't know what is the problem. Sorry about that. So, Ukraine, Kosovo, and Romania have registered the highest illicit financial outflows, money leaving the country between 2022 and 2023, while many other countries from our target like Georgia, Moldova, again Ukraine, Bosnia, Montenegro, and Albania, plus Serbia, have reported the highest illicit financial inflows, money entering the country for the same period. To explain these spikes, we have formulated and tested a few hypotheses linking the illicit financial flows and sanction evasion, more specifically with the trade with the dual-use goods. For those of you who do not know, dual-use goods are specific goods which have both civilian and military purpose. These could be semiconductors, microchips, advanced electronics, navigation systems, all kinds of goods which are at the same time civilian and could be repurposed for the military industrial complex of Russia, and they're under sanctions. We formulated two hypotheses. So one is examining whether the increase of the EU export of dual-use goods to our 10 countries from Western Balkans and Black Sea region and Armenia lead to sanction evasion, lead to the evasion of sanctions against Russia. And the second hypothesis is trying to examine whether there is a positive correlation between the rise of the illicit financial flows we estimated with the partner country method and the increase of the exports of dual-use goods from our countries, from Western Balkan countries and Black Sea region to Russia. Can you see my slides now? Because I'm moving.
We're on slide 4.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Okay. So therefore, we analyzed the trade structure of the 10 countries, and considering the enormous role of Russia in exerting its economic and political influence in these countries, we focus on the bilateral trade between these countries and Russia. After the invasion, the trade between our countries and Russia has declined, with one exception, Armenia, which in 2023 still has the largest trade deficit with Russia. However, although the trade is declining, all countries from both regions are heavily dependent on Russia, especially on energy supplies and critical raw materials. Furthermore, Russia continues to weaponize trade and energy against them. One of the most recent examples is the energy crisis in Moldova since January 2025, when Gazprom suspended the gas deliveries to Moldova and Transnistria, and actually triggered a humanitarian crisis in the region, in both countries. Excuse me. And also, as I said, as I mentioned, Russia continues to weaponize trade by imposing bans for import bans. For example, in 2023, the apples for North Macedonia were under embargo from Russia. And these are key vulnerabilities which make the countries very vulnerable to external pressure. In addition to this, we found that the existing and deeply rooted illicit networks in all of the countries, most for drug and arms trafficking, and the poor alignment and enforcement of EU sanctions, especially on the dual-use goods trade, plus the traditionally weak governance and regulatory oversight, just exacerbate the vulnerabilities and make the countries even more preferred destination for sanction evasion, for illicit trade and sanction evasion. To see what is, we have analyzed the EU export of dual-use goods to our 10 countries and their exports to Russia. We see on the graph that after the start of the war in 2022, the EU export of dual-use goods has decreased significantly to Russia, and almost stopped in 2023. However, in parallel, we observed the sudden increases of the same dual-use goods to third countries, including our 10 countries from Western Balkans and Black Sea, and Central Asian countries as well. For example, in 2023, we have calculated that the imported dual-use goods from our 10 countries and the 5 Central Asian countries in 2023 have reached 82% of the pre-war EU export to Russia, which is almost 100%, of course. Further, all of the Western Balkan countries and the Black Sea have increased their import of dual-use goods by over 50% compared to the pre-war import which they had before the war. On the next slide, we see that among all countries, we added also Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan as a benchmark cases. Serbia, the fastest growing importers are Armenia, followed by Serbia and Albania. But we can see that all countries really increased their imports of dual-use goods from EU after 2022, and this is exceeding the plausible domestic consumption and suggesting not only growing sanction evasion, but also potential re-export to Russia. We tracked also the trade, the export of dual-use goods from our countries to Russia. And we found that most significantly, Armenia and Serbia has increased their exports, followed by Bosnia and Moldova. We can see on the graph that Armenia, for example, although the export of Armenia has decreased in 2023, compared to the, again, pre-war annual average for 12 years before the war, Armenian exports has surged by 2,660% in 2023, which is enormous, and created very artificial economic growth, which make the country even more dependent on Russia. For Bosnia and Moldova, the most interesting thing is that before the war, they had very little prior history of trading this type of goods with Russia. And this sudden increase also speak about re-exporting goods selling and re-exporting goods to Russia. And so to see what is the direct impact of the increase of the EU exports to our countries and their subsequent export to Russia, we applied a statistical analysis, including also Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Turkey as 3 benchmark countries. The statistical findings revealed that the EU export that Armenia, as well as Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, emerged as a key re-export hubs. Their exports to Russia closely followed the imports from EU of these sensitive technologies. And in conclusion, I would like to highlight that in general, we found that the rise of the illicit financial flows in all countries is directly linked to the surge in illicit trade, and specifically the import of dual-use goods from Europe and then their re-export to Russia. I hope you managed to see most of the slides, but let me know if I need to go back.
Thanks very much, Tihomira. Just to complicate things, my internet completely dropped for about 2 minutes, so I'm afraid I missed the slides in the middle, but that's not your fault. We're clearly a little bit doomed today. But thank you very much. I'm sure everyone else got everything. So we will now hand over to Nedim, and Nedim is going to give us 5 to 10 minutes of his reflections and reactions on this. So Tihomira, you could now stop sharing your screen, and we'll hear from Nedim.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
All right. So, yeah, this topic of illicit financial flow has been discussed frequently in the last 15 years with relation to Russia. And it has been so because many researchers believed, and there was much empirical evidence to suggest that what happened in Russia was a sort of consolidation of kleptocracy in that period. And in that period, we saw not just Putin and his inner circle, but many members of the Duma being involved in various transnational activities that were in a way connected to illicit financial flows. With the breakout of the war in Ukraine and the Russian aggression against Ukraine, and the series of sanctions which happened against Russia between 2014 and now, we have witnessed an increase in illicit financial flows, as evidence from this presentation by Tihomira, because and we will probably witness more of them because now the sanction evasion has become crucial for Russia to maintain its war effort in Ukraine, to rebuild its army, and to keep developing its armed forces further. So in a way, illicit financial flows in Russia have become sort of better than and wedded into a same topic. The policy brief, which was shared with us prior to this presentation and on which I will base some of my interventions, mentioned various ways in which the countries where the increase in illicit financial flows happened, as well as other important actors in international relations, many steps that can be taken in order to limit illicit financial flows and their increase. And one of the points that was mentioned was, for example, that the EU should engage more strongly with countries in Western Balkans, most notably Serbia, where the greatest increase in illicit financial flows related to sanctions evasions happened. However, I don't really share the optimism that was presented by the authors of the policy brief, who sort of believe that through the usage of the so-called growth plan, which is, as some of you might not know, is a sort of mechanism to more anchor more stably countries in the region with the EU, that this anchoring might lead to a decrease in illicit financial flows. So I'm not really, I would love to see that happen, obviously, but due to the fact that the EU currently really lacks ambition in terms of enlargement, we're not really sure that actually using EU's growth plan as a sort of conditionality mechanism, which would bring about changes in this policy, would happen. And it's to a certain extent the fault of the EU itself. For example, the authors of the policy brief correctly note that an introduction of a foreign investment screening mechanism would be very useful, because it would help the countries in Western Balkans to scan and to analyze financial flows, and to be very careful over who enters as an investor in the region. It would help also with the trade flows, with monitoring of trade flows. But again, here also the EU has shown sort of a lack of ambition in promoting this. The topic, for example, in my home country, Bosnia and Herzegovina, the topic of foreign investment screening is like, I tried together with some people from International Republican Institute presenting it here, and immediately people get very upset that, as they believe you're trying to limit the influence of non-Western countries, which is for some very important, as it allows them more political space and more economic opportunities. Also, a bit more ambition has been demonstrated in trying to limit the bilateral investment treaties, which are very sort of blank treaties that countries in Western Balkans enter into without much legal analysis, without much legal discussion, again, providing a great protection to investors from some countries and letting them basically operate pretty freely. Where I do see some positive signs is the enforcement of money laundering. Some of the money laundering legislation that has been in place now in Serbia and in Bosnia is really, really tough. And it's really just to share a personal story, so you don't think I sort of make this up or have an agenda. When I tried in December 2023 to pay just 1 month of rent for an apartment that I rent in Oslo from my Bosnian account here, I had to go through enormous and incredible checks. I had to go to the bank personally, present them with a agreement between me and the landlord, translated from Norwegian into Bosnian, certified by a court translator. So we see, unfortunately, in the wrong way, we see in the wrong example, we see that actually banks take these limitations to free flow of money very, very seriously. We see their compliance departments being increasingly compliant, not just with money laundering legislation, but also with sanctions and international standards. Even in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where many individuals have been sanctioned by individual targeted sanctions for involvement in corruption activities, we see that the banks by and large comply with these sanctions. We see this in Serbia also, and it's a sort of a promising sign that usage of the banking sector as a sort of tool for compliance will take us a long road. And it's not unusual to hear this, because we see this story across the world, right? We see the compliance department in banks being in line with sanctions. That, however, leads us to another question when we think about what was presented to us into the policy brief. Is there, in fact, if there are individual targeted sanctions, right, against corrupt individuals, then should we speak about targeted evasion of money laundering standards, about targeted evasion of applying the standards towards export-import controls? Because it seems to me that in the region, and in Georgia as well, it seems to me that the banking sector and the tax authorities have increased their capacities dramatically, and are in fact in position to control perhaps not every transaction, but to really control the market for these transactions. And it opens a rather unpleasant question, which is, to what extent has there been have these illicit financial flows been helped actually by accomplices within the department, within the tax authority department, within the export-import controls, and within even banks? So with that in mind, I think that this remains a topic to be seized, and I look forward to the Center for Study of Democracy's further work on this topic. I do understand that this report that was presented to us will be developed also further as a policy paper and a research project, and I welcome that. And I really invite to see this strange discrepancy, for them to engage more in the strange discrepancy that we witness in the 6 Western Balkan countries and Georgia, where we have seen in the last few years the increase in illicit financial flows that they speak of. But at the same time, a strong increase in money laundering standards, in the work of compliance departments in banks, and this willingness to sort of crack down on innocent people like me, but also on many others who are involved in illicit financial flows. So that's something for me now.
Thank you, Nedim. Okay, so thank you to both speakers. We're going to move now to questions and answers. So please feel free to raise your hand or write a question in the chat. I mean, a number of very interesting issues raised by this, and it's something that's quite a difficult area to research. So, very pleased to have Tihomira present these preliminary findings from the research. I mean, I guess, what we're looking at here with this spike in exports of dual-use goods, particularly from certain countries to Russia. I mean, my question would be, how much is this something that we think is facilitated by state capture in those countries? So if we look at particularly, some of the big spikes coming from Serbia, for example, clearly Serbia, where we have a political regime which is quite friendly to Russia, which is, by many people described as a captured state itself. do we expect that there's a relationship here? If a state is captured, then that is going to facilitate this kind of strategic corruption, which benefits hostile great powers like Russia. That's my kickoff question, but I would encourage people to put other questions in the chat. Tihomira, do you want to go first on that one?
Yes. So yes, I agree with you, Liz. And so I think, in my opinion, to a major extent, we will see this trend in all of these countries in which Kremlin, for example, has managed to state capture the public institutions, and especially in Serbia and also in other Central Asian countries in which, for example, there is a trade union, the Eurasian Trade Union, in which Serbia, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan participate, and this facilitate this illicit trade. So yes, definitely I agree, and I think the countries in which the state captured business networks are well entrenched, the Russian state captured business networks, we expect the illicit trade to grow and the sanction evasion to continue the flow of the trade of dual-use goods and other sanctioned goods.
Okay, thanks. Ruslan, did you want to add something there?
Well, that originally was supposed to co-present with Tihomira, but as the event timeline moved, and I managed to also have an accident, so I had to stay at home. I couldn't really help, and now she's in Skopje, doing this presentation tomorrow. That's why it's been quite hectic. But I did want to, thanks to Nedim for raising the question, and I did want to follow up also, Liz, on your note. One thing that we notice in particular is that we live in a world where it's probably one of the most interesting times to look at the word illicit, because we've been thinking about how this has changed in recent months and years, particularly with the US administration, and but also how we could look at not just illegal, because so far, as Nedim mentioned, we've been completely focused on issues that are illegal. We've equated illicit with illegal. Essentially, in all of our research, in all the policy action, and so on and so forth. But as we go into sanctions, as we go into this geoeconomics field, where superpowers try to use their economic might to essentially divide countries in blocks again, maybe, who knows what's going to happen. But still, that means that some of these flows, some of these trade flows, some of these technology flows, some of these, it's not going to be just sanctioned. And again, with these sanctions, we've had a number of discussions with sanctioning authority in the EU, in the UK, and the US, and they always look at the legal part of the discussion. But the thing is, you can have legal flows of, let's say, oil that is not substantially Russian, but at the same time, that same oil flows fund the rockets that killed kids in Ukraine daily. So if we don't want them, we could clearly turn them illicit. We don't want these flows to continue going. And in particular, when you have such regimes like in Serbia, like in actually most of the countries in the Western Balkans, you could claim that there are regimes that have lasted for much longer, given the dissatisfaction that exists in the general population. It's lasted much longer than expected. And we've seen those deals, where they're signed on a state by state, and in a way they allow for these flows to continue. Like Serbia has state to state agreements with Russia and with China and with other countries that we don't know of. The thing is, it's a state secret, so we can't really know what exactly these contain. So part of the flows that we actually see here and we term illicit they might as well be under the legislation of Serbia perfectly legal. And of course, we do see, I think it was a very nice and nicely seen picture in the case of Armenia. Armenia is I mean, we've looked at a little bit more detail there. It's the perfect case of a foreign country state capture, because essentially Russia has the most direct control over Armenia. So all the other countries, they have their own national state capture networks. But if you look at the number of contacts that, for example, Serbia and Bosnia and Armenia has to Russian security forces, like FSB and these that would actually enforce state capture rules within these countries and actually add this foreign country leverage, we've had the most in Armenia, actually, and that would be definitely very interesting to look into. And we've been discussing this. The only thing is, it's very difficult to link that to some specific data. And just one final thing on the likelihood of, because we were going to look at the Magnitsky sanctions. This is something that, as this was being one of the most sanctioned regions in the world. But now that we see that, for example, the Trump administration is dialing down the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, whether they're going to follow up with the Magnitsky sanctions too, that's going to be an issue, because the Magnitsky sanction, I think, was the closest to illicit, as in what we just discussed, without being necessarily court approved as illegal. Yes, they do have this illegal proof that the US administration has to have, or the UK administration has to have, but they still don't have a judicial sanction on that. So while we say it's illicit, whatever these people who have been sanctioned under Magnitsky, we could certainly say it's illicit, given that we're part of this so far existing global network of anti-corruption. We could certainly say that it's not illegal. So it's a very interesting, I'd say it's a very interesting field that we look forward to developing further, and particularly also figuring out a way forward in terms of foreign aid development. We've seen people in North Macedonia now with the event that we're organizing together. Frankly, I think these are diplomats, from all the different embassies there, including the European Commission, the US Embassy. They don't know exactly where we will be heading, and B, they're quite afraid to actually do something that will be seen as politically incorrect, either at home or in a country there. And that makes actually following up on, doing something out of our research extremely difficult, because that means there is no direction and there's fear to actually propose and implement anything. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, yeah, very difficult to come up with the policy response. So we have some questions now that people have posted in the chat, but if people would like to ask them, then I think that's always nice for people to have an opportunity to speak. So the first one is Claire Chu. Claire, would you like to ask your question? Put your camera and mic on and ask your question.
Yes. Hi. Thank you for the presentations. This was so helpful because I typically look at these illicit networks from the China-Russia angle. And so a lot of the data, I'm excited to see this report come out and share with colleagues. So I just wanted to ask specifically Nedim to expand a little bit more on the potential sanctions policy response. How do you really use sanctions to address these networks of obfuscation and networks of sanctions evasion when it comes to dual use transfers, illicit financing? You talked a little bit about more enforcement, more oversight. What do you think is actually plausible given how difficult it is to track this type of activity?
Yeah, thank you. So the idea was this: on the one hand, to increase and to track these transactions and to try to first of all, list as much companies and sanction as much companies as possible. So that would act as a deterrence. That was one idea. The other one was to make and to promote sanction evasion as a criminal offense. But that hasn't been done well. It has been done very well and in a very radical fashion, I would say, in the US. Whereas in European jurisdictions, they lag behind with the sanctions evasion being treated as offenses. And in the countries to which this report was dedicated, there's a problem there with the punishing sanctions evasion. So that's sort of one front. The other sort of more systemic plan was to try to anchor the countries closer to the EU, these countries in question, and then to sort of try to have them abide by the trade policies and standards that the EU would promote and that the EU uses for itself, and that thereby, quite simply, this what you asked, this illicit financing via re-export channels would become limited. And that was the right thing to do. But frankly, with the right-wing opposition, where we have this sort of broad coalition of Hungary, the current US government, which still doesn't say whether it's for or against the enlargement as such, then doubts that we have seen in Germany regarding the question of enlargement itself, it seems to me that, the countries in question might just ask themselves, why would we abide by this if many of these countries are highly corrupt, right? Although they have these money laundering standards, so many of them could just, carve out what you could say, a targeted evasion of money laundering and sanctions for privileged individuals or their companies, and then, have their own personal illicit financial flow to Russia, right? Because what we had so far was this idea, well, Russia weaponizes, uses illicit financial flows for its own benefit, for state capture. Then it was to facilitate the war effort, and still is. And now you could just have this situation where you have it also in the interests of the regimes in some of these countries, and then that's really sort of terrifying. So that would be the problem, and what I can say about the matter so far.
Thank
Okay,
you. That's really helpful.
thanks very much. Next question is from Catherine Masterman. Catherine, would you like to ask your question in person? Would you like to put your mic and video on?
Hi, I think there might be a delay on the video. So my question was, I was interested in the tracking the movement of goods and money in relation to sanctions and the wider implications of how you've approached looking at this for the people looking at the difficulty of understanding trade-based money laundering. So it might be a completely stupid question, but would you see there's any sort of wider ways in which the methodology you've developed for this piece of work could be helpful in other TBML questions?
Yes, absolutely, because the partner country method actually is highly transferable to the trade-based money laundering. It compares bilateral trade data and red flag systemic under-invoicing of trade mismatches between two countries. So I think yes, absolutely, it can be applied to track illicit financial flows from trade-based money laundering, if this was the question. And red flag, the illicit financial flows from trade-based money laundering.
Okay, that's great. Basia.
Greetings. Thank you very much for a great session and all the wonderful research work. My question is centering around private security military corporations. Obviously, with the export of Russian organized crime and deep state activities starting from the 1990s, have found a lot of partnership, businesses, and investments in several countries. So have you ever come across any problems associated with the PSMCs, law firms? And my second question is I'd like to modify it a bit. Instead of frauds, I wanted to ask a question on detecting futures, investing in futures and complex financial instruments as a way to circumvent sanctions, because in the investigative work, nothing is as great as raising a red flag, and that turns out to be a smoking gun and jackpot. And one of the jackpot I had was on Gazprom Bank, because I've raised the issue of futures investments that are basically considered trade and has a certain confidentiality. And when Uncle Sam started looking at it, in less than a day, response was taken and sanctions were levied. So I don't know, just different ways and what are the unknown unknowns. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. And also, I'm definitely going to use that red flags that turn into smoking guns that turn into jackpots. Tihomira.
So yes, unfortunately, we haven't researched the private sector actors, and I cannot. I don't remember any specific name of private security company or military company. This was regarding the first question, and regarding the second one, I think yes, one of our next steps is to research the cryptocurrencies and other contemporary tools, digital tools in sanction evasion. In sanction evasion, because we know that in Moldova and other countries, the illicit actors are often using cryptocurrencies and other digital tools to evade sanctions and sustain their illicit trade.
Thank you very much.
So with regards to private military companies, not enough research has been made yet. Of course, those who researched corruption in Russia focused a lot on Prigozhin and what was the Wagner Group and where they went and what they did for Russia. The problem that you have, and where I would look at if I had more time and energy, is this situation that you have like in Africa, and it might spread to other countries, where you have these ghost soldiers, where you have this situation where parts of the army are being funded, and then these funds are not really looked at properly, they're not audited properly, and then this part of the army may enter into transactions with various foreign actors, Russia in particular, but not just Russia, I mean, can enter into various deals with other countries. And this is, I mean, I have a sort of framework paper which I'm trying to publish together with Ina Kube this year. And there are some other people who have published something. So I think in a year or two, we will be looking at semi-privatized militaries, not just in Russia, but in many different countries, trying to operate these illicit financial flows. But I wish I could point you, maybe some other people can join in, but at this moment, I cannot give you a better answer with the private military companies. What I would also do, I mean, we need to know more about why the banks have been, so compliant. Is it just because they've been punished so much by the previous US administrations? Even the first Trump administration was very strict on these things. And now, if that's true, that was just from the fear of punishment, then, I mean, then we could witness in a year or two a great degradation in terms of money laundering prevention if the heads of various corporate groups decide that this screening is not important so much, and that the compliance departments can, start laying off people because they're sort of swollen and getting increased. And really in the US, you have seen this initiative to limit, to sort of say, okay, just $100,000 as a limit for transactions to be screened. That's what we should be looking at. So looking at why things worked in that sector might help us see whether we can do something for the futures, although due to this connection with cryptocurrencies and other sort of new technologies, there's less of a chance that the change would come so quickly. At least that's my 5 cents. Thank you.
Ruslan, were you wanting to respond on that?
If I may, just an idea. Sorry, if I may, just an idea. Credit rating companies are also a good source. Would be a good partner. Over.
Because there are.
I think, Ruslan, you might want to come in for a second just to say that we've then got 3 more questions lined up.
No, so I just think it is a great question, and we look forward to trying to look into that. Our working hypothesis was that any self-respecting criminal network, including those that are highest up and linked, white collar and linked to the governments of those countries, as Liz mentioned, state capture, I think would try to get engaged in that very, very lucrative trade. So I think we need to just dig deeper, and I think we're going to find a lot of smoking guns out there.
Fantastic. Okay, next up is Karok Abdullah. Karok, would you like to put your camera and mic on and ask your question?
Hi, Liz. I think Karok just sent a message saying that he's not in a position to speak.
Okay, so I will, in that case, ask the question from the chat. So Karok says, I was wondering whether there's a discernible pattern in the flow and types of dual-use goods. Is the market primarily driven by demand or by opportunity? And to what extent is it structured and oriented toward long-term activity? Tihomira, any thoughts on that?
I think it's driven by both, by demand and by opportunity, because we observe that in some countries the increase, the export of dual use is enormous, in other is smaller, but there are sudden spikes, which means that where there is opportunity, if each opportunity is used to obtain critical, not only dual use goods, but also materials and sanctioned goods in general.
Okay.
And so regarding the types of the dual use goods, we observe the full list of common high priority items of the EU, including sensors, microchips, electronics, everything which was included in these common high priority items. Navigation, everything.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next question is Roberto. Roberto, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, all. Great presentation. 2 quick questions. So one is, have you found any evidence that because of sanctions, trade has actually gone of dual goods completely off grid, including payments, the use of cryptocurrencies or other products that would completely circumvent the financial system and avoid what Nedim was describing as increased scrutiny? And the second question is, have you been using beneficial ownership information to understand whether or not these companies have any other connection to criminal activity, or maybe these are just companies that found an economic opportunity given to sanctions and want to increase their profit by trading in something they know is going to be profitable, though risky? Thank you.
Great questions. Thank you.
Yes, I need to make a note here that we actually compared official data from EU and not from companies. So we haven't traced exports of particular companies to Russia, but we investigated we found different cases where particular companies have exported or smuggled the used goods to Russia, mainly logistical companies. But we don't have access to more information about there. We know that there was specifically mentioned for some of them that they're linked to Russian citizens, but we haven't explored and further investigated their links with Russia.
Okay, and then final question, Robert Barrington. Robert, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. I've got a question on professional enablers, which of course has been quite well studied in the parallel area of more standard IFFs. I'm just wondering if you encounter the same enablers in this field, and whether you see any patterns of enabling emerging here, whether it's a bit different to standard IFFs or whether they're the same players, whether they're in particular jurisdictions, whether they're large law firms, for example, or other types of enabler.
Okay, Tihomira.
Well, in our cases, we observed more like logistical firms as the main enablers of the trade with the dual-use goods. And I cannot speak about the law firms or other enablers, but the logistical company seems to be the major enabler so far of this trade with dual-use goods, because it usually happens when a person contact the company, and the company said that the logistical company promised that these sensitive technologies, although they're under sanctions, can be smuggled or transferred to Russia without any official custom declaration, and this is the case. I mean, there's no law or accountancy involved.
That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're nearly at the end. I don't know if either Tihomira or Nedim has a kind of last word that you would like to make before we close. Perhaps to Nedim first.
Not really. I'm happy to have participated in this event, and I received many great questions, and I sort of my own research agenda will flourish as a result of some of the insights I have gained through this event. So thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. And Tihomira?
Yes, thank you very much for your questions and for being here. And yes, as a conclusion, I would like to add that it's very important the EU development assistance and the economic support for Western Balkans and Black Sea countries is extremely important for the decoupling of these countries from Russia. And also, it is quite important EU and Western Balkan countries, as well as Black Sea, to modernize their trade policies and embed the security aspects, so we can have full diversification and in the trade between the countries and to other world. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks so much, both of you, for joining us today. Just to say to everybody that this is research that is ongoing. We're only a year into it, and there are 2 more years of research. So these preliminary findings will be complemented by a lot more findings in the future too. So do watch this space, and do also watch our social media channels for news about the next ACE seminar, which will be next month, and we should be announcing details of that shortly. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.